When Aurora loses her fiancé Eli in a tragic accident, grief becomes her shadow, until a letter he never sent leads her to Asher, his estranged brother. Bound by loss but divided by guilt, Aurora and Asher find themselves drawn to one another in ways neither expected and both fear. As grief gives way to a fragile connection, they must confront an impossible question. Can love grow in the space where another once lived? Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain came down in fine needles, soaking the velvet lining of Aurora's black coat and leaving delicate rivulets on the polished mahogany casket. The sky was heavy with grief, as if it too mourned the loss of Eli Jameson. Aurora stood motionless, her fingers clenched around a small white rose. His favorite flower, a simple bloom that once lived in a vase by their kitchen sink, often replaced weekly without a word. The petals were beginning to wilt in her grip, bruised by her tension and the weather. Around her, voices murmured prayers and farewells. The priest spoke, but the words blurred like fogged glass, distant and irrelevant. Aurora stared at the coffin as if willing it to open, half expecting Eli's laugh to erupt and for this to be one of his elaborate, ill-advised pranks. But there was no laughter, no warmth, only the steady hum of the rain and the cold weight of absence pressing down on her lungs. The crowd had gathered under umbrellas like islands of black silk. Friends, distant relatives, co-workers. Faces she barely recognized offered their condolences, their words falling flat, thin paper cutouts of sympathy. She nodded, silent and tight-lipped, trying not to scream into the void their kindness left untouched. Then came a voice she did not expect. "Aurora!" She turned, the name foreign on someone else's tongue. A man stood just outside the row of mourners. Tall, sharp-edged, and rain-drenched, his black hair plastered to his forehead, a crooked scar trailing down his right jawline like an unfinished sentence. His eyes, an uncanny echo of Eli's, locked onto hers. A jolt passed through her chest. "I'm Asher," he said. She knew that, of course. Eli had spoken of him rarely, and when he did, it was with a mixture of longing and bitterness. The brother he hadn't seen in nearly 4 years. The one who left after a fight neither of them would explain. The ghost sibling made real. Aurora hesitated. Thank you for coming." "It didn't feel optional," he said, voice low but steady. "He was my brother." She looked down, the words sticking in her throat like thorns. "He was my everything." Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Asher's hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his dark coat, but his shoulders betrayed a tension, a hesitancy she couldn't place. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," he continued. "I didn't even know if you'd want me here." "I don't know what I want," she replied quietly, "except for this not to be real." Another beat of silence. A bird cried overhead, startled by the sound of earth being shoveled onto wood. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it." Aurora didn't respond. What was there to say? She stared at the ground, at the damp, churned soil swallowing the man she loved. Behind her, the priest finished the rites, and people began to move, dispersing in 2s and 3s, umbrellas bobbing away like ships setting sail. But Aurora stayed. And so did Asher. The cemetery emptied, but neither of them moved. She could feel him near her, not close enough to touch, but not far enough to forget. The resemblance was haunting, same jawline, same unruly hair, same shape of the eyes. But Asher's gaze carried something Eli's never had. A shadow, a silence behind the eyes. "I'll go," he said finally, voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to intrude." He turned, boots crunching on gravel. "You didn't," Aurora said. He paused, glancing back. The rain fell harder now, unrelenting. "Goodbye, Aurora," he said. She watched him walk away, disappearing into the mist and the cypress trees like a vanishing memory. Only when he was gone did she let the rose fall from her hand. It landed on the coffin with a soft, final thud. And the sky kept weeping. The door creaked open with the familiar, broken sigh it always made when Eli pushed it too hard. But this time it was just Aurora, alone, clutching a grocery bag filled with takeout she probably wouldn't eat. The apartment smelled the same: cedarwood candles, old books, and the faintest trace of his cologne clinging to the coat he'd left draped over the back of the chair. She hadn't moved it. It had been 23 days since the accident, 14 since the funeral. And every day, Aurora walked into their home expecting him to call out from the kitchen, or complain about the heat, or kiss her forehead as if he couldn't help himself. But the silence had become a living thing, curling into the corners of every room, waiting for her in the hall, breathing behind her neck when she turned the lights off at night. The food stayed untouched on the counter. Instead, she drifted toward his studio, the smallest room in the apartment, cluttered with paint-stained rags, open sketchbooks, and canvases that stood like forgotten sentinels against the walls. Aurora reached for the doorknob, then stopped. She hadn't been inside since. Her fingers hovered, brushing the brass. Then she turned it. The smell hit her first, turpentine and linseed oil, sharp and nostalgic. The room was frozen in time. His last work still sat on the easel, a half-finished oil painting of a sunlit street corner, brushstrokes crisp and full of motion, like he'd only stepped out for a glass of water. Her eyes burned. She crossed the room slowly, careful not to disturb anything. Dust had already begun to gather on the table, on the palette where reds and ochres had dried into brittle clumps. She touched nothing, only let her eyes trace the remnants of his presence. Then she noticed the notebook. It sat beneath an overturned coffee mug on the edge of the desk, the cover warped from moisture. Not his sketchbook. This one was lined, scribbled with the hurried scrawl he used when journaling or writing letters he never sent. She hesitated, heart lurching in her chest, then reached for it. The mug clattered to the floor. She barely noticed. Flipping through the pages felt like trespassing, but she couldn't stop. He'd written about everything: color studies, ideas for murals, random thoughts about life and grief and love. Then, halfway through, one entry made her stop. Asher called again today. Didn't pick up. I want to. I miss him. But what the hell would I say after 4 years of silence? Sorry I took Dad's side. Sorry I let my pride keep us apart. He deserves better than silence. I should write him. Something. Anything. Aurora blinked hard. She turned the page. A letter began in shaky script. Ash, if you're reading this, it means I grew some guts and finally sent it. Or Aurora found it and mailed it for me. She always had more faith in us than I did. I don't know where to begin. I miss you, man. The letter stretched across several pages. Apologies, memories, a few dumb jokes, and a confession that Eli had been carrying the weight of their falling out like a stone in his chest. It ended simply. You were my best friend before you were my brother. I wish we'd found our way back sooner. Aurora sat back, the letter trembling in her hands. They'd only met once, years ago. A quick, forgettable introduction at a family gathering. She hadn't thought about it since. Apparently he had. But she knew now this mattered. The letter had never been sent. Eli had kept it here, possibly planning to rewrite it, or waiting for a better moment. That moment never came. Her chest ached with a new kind of guilt. Not just for the loss of Eli, but for everything left unresolved between him and the person she barely knew. She stared at the page for a long while before making a decision. That evening, with shaking fingers, Aurora pulled out her phone and searched the name Asher Jameson. It took longer than it should have. A grainy photo on a local music blog confirmed it was him, guitarist, studio tech, lived in the next city over. She stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Instead, she opened her email. Subject: I found something. I think it's meant for you. Hi, Asher. I'm not sure if this is the right address, but I hope it reaches you. I came across a letter from Eli today. I think he wanted you to have it. Let me know if you'd like me to send it. Or meet. I don't know what feels right, but this felt important. Aurora. She hit send before she could overthink it. Then she sat in the dark, waiting for a ghost to answer. Aurora arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe was quiet, full of soft jazz and half-finished conversations. She chose a window seat, sat with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't want, and waited. She almost didn't recognize him when he walked in. Asher Jameson had the kind of presence that unsettled the air around him. Taller than she remembered, sharper too, like grief had carved him down to essentials. He didn't scan the room like someone looking for a stranger. He saw her immediately and walked straight over. Hey, he said simply. Aurora stood. Hi. They didn't hug. They barely made eye contact. He took the seat across from her, both of them shifting, unsure of the rules now. "I found a letter," she said after a moment. "From Eli. To you." He went still. "When?" "Last week. In his studio. He never sent it." She slid the envelope across the table. The edges were worn from where she'd handled it too much, but it was intact. He stared at it for a second, then picked it up and unfolded the pages. Aurora watched the change in him as he read. His jaw tightened, his fingers twitched slightly, but his expression stayed unreadable. The silence between them stretched, full of things neither of them could name. When he reached the end, he folded the pages carefully and tucked them into his jacket. "Thanks," he said, his voice lower now, "for giving this to me. I thought it might matter." "It does." They sat with the weight of it for a while. The hum of the espresso machine behind the counter, the clink of mugs, the occasional laugh from another table. It all felt too loud. "You know," Asher said, staring out the window, "he used to put hot sauce on pancakes." Aurora blinked. "He told me he hated spicy food." "Liar," he said, a small, sad smile pulling at his lips. "He just didn't want to scare you off." She laughed softly. The sound surprised her. "You two were close once?" she asked. "Yeah, before we weren't." He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. "I didn't know you then," she said. He never talked much about what happened. "He wouldn't," Asher murmured. "We both messed up. I walked away. He let me." A quiet settled over the table again, not quite awkward, just fragile. "I didn't come here expecting to feel anything," he admitted, finally meeting her eyes. "But reading that letter, he still cared. A lot more than I thought." "He missed you," Aurora said. "He just didn't know how to fix it." "I didn't either." They both fell silent, watching each other across their drinks like two people standing at opposite edges of the same bridge. "I don't know if this is weird," she said, "but I'd like to talk again. About him. Or not about him. Just talk." Asher looked at her, studying her face like he was seeing someone familiar in a new light. "I'd like that," he said. And for the first time in a long time, Aurora felt something shift, not away from grief, but alongside it. Not healing, but the beginning of room for something else. Aurora hadn't gone into the studio since the day she found the letter. She kept the door shut like a wound that wasn't ready to breathe. But something about seeing Asher again, the way he looked at her without flinching, the way he folded Eli's letter like it mattered, unlocked something. The next morning, she pushed open the door. Dust floated in long beams of sunlight cutting through the blinds. The air smelled like turpentine canvas and something more intangible like memory. Eli's world had always existed here, half paint and half dream. His tools still lay where he'd left them. Brushes crusted with dried oils, jars of pigment, half-finished sketches thumbtacked to the wall. She moved slowly, letting the silence speak. It didn't haunt her, not today. It felt reverent. Aurora started sorting. She pulled out canvas after canvas, some covered, some bare. A few made her smile. A sketch of a subway rider with a tired stare, an abstract splash of yellows he'd called an experiment gone wrong, and a series of rooftops at dusk. Others were more intimate, portraits of her, mostly from behind, brushing her hair, tying her shoes, gazing out the window. But one painting stopped her cold. It was wrapped in a drop cloth and wedged behind an old easel. He'd tucked it away like a secret. She unwrapped it and stared. It was of her. And Asher. The composition wasn't perfect. It was unfinished, maybe 2/3 complete, but the emotion was unmistakable. She was seated at a table, looking off to the side with a soft, contemplative expression. Across from her sat Asher, hands folded loosely in front of him, head tilted as if mid-laugh. Their faces weren't fully detailed, but their postures, relaxed, familiar, warm, told the story. Aurora's throat tightened. She stepped back, clutching the edges of the canvas as if it might disappear. Eli had painted this. From memory. From imagination. From something he saw that she hadn't. Had Eli noticed something before they ever did? Or feared something they hadn't dared to think? She couldn't stop looking at it. Later that evening, her fingers hovered over her phone. "I found something in the studio. You should see it." Asher's reply came quickly. "Want me to come by?" "Tomorrow afternoon." "I'll be there." The next day, he arrived at 3. No sunglasses this time. just a dark jacket and quiet eyes. Aurora led him to the studio without small talk. She watched his reaction as he stepped inside, the space still thick with Eli's presence. Then he saw the painting. He didn't speak right away. Just stood in front of it, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. "He painted this," he said eventually. "Yeah." Asher tilted his head. "It's us. I don't know when. I don't even remember us sitting like that. Maybe we didn't." They stood side by side, watching the unfinished figures captured in that moment. Aurora kept waiting for the guilt to rise, for the familiar ache of betrayal or loss. But it didn't come. There was only stillness. "I don't know what this means," she said, almost whispering. "Me neither." He turned to look at her. "But it feels honest." Aurora nodded. "It does." He lingered a little longer, taking in the brushstrokes, the lighting, the softness around the edges. Then he stepped back. "I should go," he said. Aurora followed him to the door. He paused there, hesitating. "I'm not trying to fill his space," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "And I'm not asking you to." Their eyes met. No promises. No answers. Just the feeling that something had started, whether they meant for it to or not. Snow began to fall that evening, soft and slow, dusting the city in silence. Aurora watched it from the window with the lights off, her breath fogging the glass. The world looked distant, like a memory just out of reach. She hadn't seen Asher in nearly 2 weeks. Since the painting, they'd exchanged a few texts, light surface level, but something unspoken lingered in the air between them. Not tension, exactly. Something quieter. Unsettled. She caught herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. Not as Eli's brother. Not as a symbol of everything she'd lost. Just Asher. It was a Saturday evening when he texted again. "You home?" "Yeah. Can I come by?" She hesitated. Then typed. "Sure. Just me and some leftover wine. Sounds like a good night." He arrived with snow in his hair and a bottle of whiskey in his hand. "I figured we could trade sips," he said, brushing flakes from his shoulders. Aurora stepped aside. "You always show up with alcohol. It's cheaper than therapy." They settled on the couch, the studio door closed behind them. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamp glow through the curtains. The whiskey warmed her chest. The silence warmed something else. For a while they talked. About everything but Eli. Asher told her about the band he played with before it fell apart. Aurora told him about the job she hadn't gone back to yet. Somewhere between the third glass and the first real laugh, something shifted. "You know," he said, voice lower now, "I used to hate how perfect he seemed." Aurora looked at him. "Eli." "Yeah. He made things look easy. Art. People. You. He didn't always feel perfect. Maybe not. But he had you. And that was—" He didn't finish the sentence. The air between them thickened. "Asher," she started, but he shook his head. "I know this is messy. I know what it looks like." "I'm not worried about what it looks like," she said. He turned toward her, closer now. "Then what are you worried about?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "That I'm betraying him. That I'm confusing comfort for something else." His expression softened. "I think about that too. Every time I think about you." Aurora's breath caught. The room shrank to a pinpoint of closeness. Then he leaned in. The kiss was slow, uncertain, like neither of them quite believed it was happening. It didn't rush. It settled. And when they pulled apart, both of them looked away, ashamed of something they couldn't name. Aurora stood first. "We shouldn't," she murmured. "No," he agreed. "We shouldn't." But neither of them moved toward the door. Instead, they sat in silence again, this one sharper than the others. A silence shaped like guilt. Like wanting. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, Aurora tried not to wonder what it meant that she didn't want him to leave. Aurora didn't answer Asher's messages for 3 days. Not because she was angry. Not because she didn't want to. But because she didn't trust herself with what she felt. The kiss still lingered. On her mouth, in her chest, in the deep part of her that used to be reserved for Eli. It had been a moment of heat in a season of cold, but it hadn't been meaningless. That was the problem. It had meant too much. She kept replaying it. Not just the kiss, but the way Asher had looked at her afterward. Like he already regretted wanting her, but couldn't stop himself. She couldn't stop either. But she tried. He showed up at her door on the 4th day. Not with alcohol. Not with charm. Just himself, coat unzipped, eyes cautious. I thought I'd at least get to say goodbye before you disappeared again, he said. Aurora crossed her arms. I just needed space. I figured. But space for what? To feel bad? To convince yourself you imagined it. She didn't respond. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, though he didn't get too close. I shouldn't have kissed you. I know that. No, she said softly. I kissed you back. Don't rewrite it. Asher nodded, jaw tight. I think about you, Aurora. I think about you all the time. Before Eli died, I already did. That's the truth. Her stomach turned. How long? He hesitated. Since we first met. That family picnic. You wore this ugly yellow dress with sunflowers. You hated the food, and Eli was being loud and charming and himself. But you looked like you were trying to hold your breath the whole time. She remembered that day. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were his. And I would have rather cut my own tongue out than hurt him. Aurora looked away, her pulse hammering. So what is this now? Some twisted version of finally getting what you couldn't have before. No, he said quickly. God, no. This isn't about taking something. It's about not running anymore. I can't do this with you, she said, voice trembling. I'm still in love with him. I'm not asking you not to be. His words hung in the air. I just want to be allowed to feel something too. She stepped back, heart splintering. I don't know how to be in this with you without feeling like I'm erasing him. You're not. You can't, he said. But if you want me gone, I'll go. Just say it. She stared at him. Silence fell again, the kind that builds pressure behind the ribs. Then, quietly, she said, I think you should leave. Asher nodded once. Hurt flickered across his face, but he didn't argue. He opened the door, stepped out into the hall, and didn't look back. When the door clicked shut, Aurora sank to the floor. She didn't cry. She just sat there in the quiet, knowing she'd pushed away the one person who understood exactly how much she was breaking. And knowing it had nothing to do with Asher being Eli's brother. And everything to do with the way he made her feel alive again. It was raining again. Aurora sat curled in Eli's studio, the door half closed behind her, the unfinished portrait of her and Asher still propped up on its easel like an open wound. She hadn't touched it. She couldn't bring herself to. But she couldn't stop looking at it either. Since asking Asher to leave, everything felt hollow again. Like she'd stepped back into a version of herself that only knew how to grieve. She missed him. Not as Eli's brother. Not as a replacement. Just him. She didn't mean to find the second letter. She was digging through Eli's desk for a fresh notebook. Something clean to fill with the thoughts she was too afraid to say aloud. When she found it. Folded neatly, unsealed, tucked between 2 pages of an old sketch pad. Her name was written in his handwriting on the front. Aurora. If I ever get too quiet or too distant or too scared to say things aloud, read this. You always read me better than I read myself, but just in case you ever need the words. Her hands trembled as she read. I know I'm lucky. Being with you never felt ordinary, not even for a second. But I've also felt like you were still searching for something you didn't know you'd lost. And sometimes when you laugh around Asher, it sounds different. Brighter. Aurora's breath caught. I used to think I was imagining it. I don't think that anymore. And it doesn't make me love you less. It makes me want more for you, even if that more doesn't include me. The tears came hard then. Fast. She curled into herself on the floor, pressing the letter to her chest like it could hold her together. If you ever feel something real for him, I want you to know. I'm okay with that. I love you enough to let you go. The last line wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was just true. Later that night, she sat in the dark of her living room, the letter open beside her. She read it 3 times. Then once more. She didn't know what she was supposed to do with forgiveness from someone who wasn't here anymore. She didn't know if she deserved it. But she felt it. And for the first time in weeks, her heart didn't feel like it was tearing in two. It felt like it was making space. For grief. For Eli. And for something else she was finally ready to stop denying. The first warm day of spring arrived quietly. The last of the snow had melted, leaving behind wet sidewalks and the first brave crocuses pushing up from the earth. Aurora stood beneath a cherry blossom tree in the old park near the river, the one Eli used to sketch when he wanted to clear his head. She hadn't been there since the week he died. She waited with her hands tucked into the sleeves of her light coat, her breath unsteady, but her heartbeat calm in a way it hadn't been in months. When Asher arrived, she saw him before he saw her. He looked thinner, maybe more tired, but there was something steadier in the way he walked. Like whatever edges they'd both been living on had softened. He stopped a few feet from her. "Hey, hey," she said. The silence between them wasn't sharp this time. It just existed. "I didn't think you'd call," he said. Aurora gave a small smile. "I wasn't sure I would either." He looked away for a moment. "You okay?" "I found another letter," she said. "From Eli. To me." Asher didn't speak, just waited. "He gave me permission. In the only way he could." She took a breath. "And I don't need it." That caught him off guard. His eyes searched hers, unsure. "I don't mean that cruelly," she added. "I just mean I've been waiting for someone to tell me how to feel, and maybe no one can. Not Eli. Not you. Not even grief. It's mine. And it's still here. But so are you." Asher looked at her like he was afraid to hope. She stepped closer. "I don't know where this goes. I don't have promises. But I don't want to pretend anymore." He didn't smile, not fully, but his shoulders relaxed. He looked up at the cherry blossoms above them, the soft pink petals catching in his hair. "This feels wrong," he said. "And somehow right." "It does," she agreed. They stood together, letting the spring wind move around them. Nothing was resolved, not entirely. The grief wasn't gone. The pain didn't vanish. But in its place was something new. Something quieter than joy. Something gentler than regret. Not a love story rewritten. A love story beginning again.